So in this session at GroupBy, Ron Dameron is going to be talking about Uptight Database Security. So take it away, Ron.
All right, thank you. And like I said, thank you, Brent, and GroupBy voters for giving me a chance to do this. This is like a little screenshot of me doing a happy dance during a softball game. I mean, now, can I switch and show the video real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see.
It's your time, man. Go ahead.
Okay. So this was at, can you guys see the video?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
It hasn't started playing yet, but yeah.
Okay, so I started playing it. So I'm at first base. And this only takes about 30 seconds.
Looks like a surveillance video.
Right?
Yeah, it's up on the backstop.
There it goes.
That's a double play.
Nice. And your happy dance.
That's my happy dance. So that's, I said I would do the happy dance if I got selected for Past Summit. I did the happy dance when I got selected for this because I was like, I initially was like, I'm not going to do this anymore because nobody ever comes to see it. I get like 5 people, 10 people at a SQL Saturday.
Now you got 200 people in here.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last time I just did this talk at the SQL Saturday, the past one in Orlando, and the room was packed.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, wow. So I was pretty happy about that. So just a little bit about me. I have a distant cousin in the Rebel Alliance. His name's Poe Dameron. I'm the only DBA for a small software company now. I used to work, when I did this project, I worked for a big insurance company. And now my job is split between dealing with on-premises stuff. We have 2 SQL servers on premises, and it's in an availability group. So I get to play around with that, fix it when somebody breaks it, which Hurricane Irma actually broke it. So that was a fun experience. And the reason I'm called, when I worked for, and this is where SQL Saturday helped me find my next job and why I could walk to my, or do my job interview in a polo and khakis is I met a guy named Dmitry Kortkevich, who's another MCM, at a SQL Saturday like, I don't know, 5 years ago. And my last company decided they wanted everybody to move to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I live in Florida. And I'm like, I'm not moving to North Carolina. Raleigh, North Carolina. Nothing against Raleigh, but compared to, I get to play softball all year round here in Florida. So, and then plus my wife would have said, no way, I'm not going. So we were at a SQL Saturday, the last Tampa SQL Saturday, which was a couple of years ago, because last year they couldn't do it. They were doing something at USF with the building. We were talking to me and Dimitri, who was at the time the director of application development. We were talking to another MVP from down South Florida, Hervé Rogero. He's now got a startup called Enzo. And he asked me, what are you doing these days? And I said, well, I work for Dimitri. I'm a lead DBA. And Dimitri goes, you're the only DBA. And I was like, that's my job title. Because we kept going back and forth during the job interview. I was like, what's my job title going to be? Because I have to support on-premises stuff, SQL Server, but then I also have to support Azure stuff, Azure SQL Database and monitoring and alerting. So now even on my signature block in my email, I have the only DBA at work. So, but anyway. Enough about me.
I mean, your current job title kind of matters less than the job title you put on your resume when you're looking for the next one, right?
I know. I'm trying to figure out, because now they've added me to a DevOps team.
Oh, boy.
I actually had to do a development task. I'm trying to figure out, okay, I've set up a bunch of alerts, but I've used a portal to do it. I'm like, there's got to be an easier way to do it. But the PowerShell in Azure is still a pain in the butt.
You know what's awesome about DevOps is that like hardly anyone has like the DevOps handle, so you could totally be DevOps Ron, like SQL Ron or Ron SQL. That's long gone, man. All those SQL handles are just out of the door. You can be DevOps all day.
I thought about changing it somehow, and I'm like, but then I hear that kind of screws up all your Twitter, your timeline. So Anyway, so here's the agenda today. I'm going to talk about why I had to do this. And I'm going to talk about, do you always have to be sysadmin to do your DBA job, your daily tasks, what I would say your routine tasks. And then we'll talk about the 6 steps you need to go through, plus some assumptions to lock down your databases. And then I'll do it's a really quick demo. It's one big script with those 6 steps in it. I'll talk about the resources that I used to come up with this solution, and then, take questions. And I'll take questions throughout the time, Eric, because I expect it'll go about an hour. It normally doesn't go much longer than that, unless people start asking crazy questions.
I have cleared up my schedule.
Okay. So anyway, all right. So now I'm going to try and put a poll into Slack, if I can do this right.
If you want me to type it, I can do it for you.
Well, I got it. Let me see here. There it is. Oh, it's over here. Let's try this. Let's see if this works.
There you go.
Oh, well, thanks to Brent for giving me the syntax on that. Because I saw you guys doing it last week. I'm like, okay, good. DBAs.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I learned during Speaker Idol, I did Speaker Idol a couple years ago. They said, find out who's in the audience.
Makes sense.
I'm like, okay.
Who you're talking to. Oh, 2 security people. I never would have guessed.
Well, and this was they were some of the people that were kind of instigating the whole thing. Okay, so let me get back to my screen. Okay, good. All right, thank you very much. So yes, believe it or not, DBAs, you can do your job, and you don't have to be sysadmin all the time. Now, I never want to be this DBA, and this is a good reason why you would want to do this, especially if you're in a really big company. This happened at Anthem Insurance, which is a Blue Cross Blue Shield provider, a couple of years ago. One of their database administrators saw queries running on their production servers that they didn't kick off. And they also found other database administrators' logins have been compromised. So this is, if this doesn't send a chill down your spine, I don't think anything will. And like I said, when I was initially tasked with this job or this project, I pushed back because I thought it would be a royal pain to be a DBA. Because at the time I was supporting a line of business, but I was also, I think I had been supporting a line of business, and I'd gotten promoted into another team that was more like an engineering team. Again, big company. And this was in like 2006 or 2007. And again, insurance company. So at that point, we still had a lot of SQL Server 2000 running. Yeah. And I told the VP that was instigating this, who had come from a mainframe background. He goes, we can do this on the mainframe. Can we do this in SQL Server? I said, not right now. I mean, I'd have to do some research, but I mean, if you look at SQL Server 2000 and you look at some of the stored procedures, the system stored procedures, several of them have checks that says, are you sysadmin? It checks your login. Are you sysadmin? Okay, fine. Do what you want. I mean, there's no permission check. If you're sysadmin, then, the door's wide open for you. Now, this got easier. When 2005 came out, they added that control server permission. Then things started, looking like this might be possible to do. And, but then, of course, like I said, being at the insurance company, it took another year or two for them to finally start agitating for this more. So why would you want to do this? Obviously, decrease risk. Auditors who were starting to, the auditors that were looking at our environment, they don't like always on sysadmin, so that's kind of a homage to Alan Hurt. They wanted more control of the production databases because at the time we had we had 600 SQL servers at the time. And we had like 50 DBAs, both onshore and offshore. And everybody had sysadmin rights. And, you know, they wanted it to be changed to where you only needed sysadmin when you needed it. And then the other reason you would do this is it's just another defensive layer. If somebody gets into your network, if you've got, you know, if your DBAs don't have privileged access, they don't have a sysadmin rights, then it's going to be harder for them to do anything harmful. So IT risk, they called it IT security audit and compliance at the previous company. And they were the ones that were agitating the most about it. So now, the requirements at the company were sysadmin access only when needed, and then that DBAs don't have access to user data. And like I said, that VP who had come from the mainframe world at that time, when we were talking about this again, I guess we started talking about it again about 2007, maybe even later, 2009, because they sent me to Pass Summit in 2010. And that's where I saw Laura Rebelke and Il-Sung Lee do a presentation on the first Microsoft separation of duties white paper. And what's funny is in that white paper, there's a quote in that paper right at the beginning. It says, do not use the sysadmin role as a general purpose DBA role. And I'm like, that's what everybody does. So, I mean, I think that from what they were telling, and I talked to Laura Rebelke after the talk, and she said the reason they had to start doing this is because they were getting, I guess, requests from customers saying, we need to be able to control DBA's access to production data. And that's why this, you know, this came about. So it took a lot of convincing. I started interviewing the DBA teams. Granted, like I said, I got hired initially as a DBA to support a certain line of business, so I knew what tasks I did. And I started documenting them in a spreadsheet, all the different, you know, trying to figure out, okay, what do we do every day? And what did other DBAs do? And some of those interviews were like pulling teeth because the offshore team would like, I'd say, okay, what do you do? And dead silence. And I'm like, so it got to the point where, okay, do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And then, so I had this big spreadsheet with all these tasks. And then I spent days researching what permissions do you need to do these tasks. So when I initially started doing this talk a number of years ago, I would have this quiz at the beginning. So to run SP configure, do you need to be sysadmin? And do you need it for when you run it with 0 parameters, 1 parameter, 2 parameters? Do you need it when you run reconfigure? And believe it or not, the answer is you don't need sysadmin rights to run this particular command. If you run it with no parameters, or only, let's see, the first parameter, any user can do that. Now, if you execute SP configure with both parameters, and you want to change a configuration option, or run the reconfigure statement, you have to have the alter settings server level permission. Now, that's implicitly granted to sysadmin or server admin fixed server roles. But we were trying to prevent people from having sysadmin rights all the time. Now, and then the reconfigure permissions that defaults to people who have alter settings permission. And sysadmin and server admin have that also. Now, do you need to be sysadmin to kill a process, to view the SQL Server error log, or to run DBC check DB? To kill a process, again, you don't have to be sysadmin. You need, in SQL Server 2012, I had to make notes for this one because it's different by version. 2012,
Which helps make
2008.
security so much easier.
Oh, well, and that's the thing with this. Okay, if I work in a small company now, this is overkill. So if you're in a small company and there's a small team, I mean, you have to figure out what do you do. You have to figure out, is this worth your time? And there's a few other things that I'm going to talk about that cost a fair amount of money, I'm sure, to enable this. But for like killing a process, you only need alter any connection permission. And that's included with when you're a sysadmin or process admin fixed server role. Now, SQL Server 2005, again, you would have to either be sysadmin or process admin. Now, the error log, viewing the SQL Server error log, that was actually kind of a pain in the butt because trying to figure out what the exact permissions were, because it's like SP, there's a stored procedure that gets called SP read error log, and then XP read error log, and I have a link to a log file viewer, the log file viewer topic, and it ended up they had enough permissions they couldn't see it through Management Studio, but they could see it in the file system. But I'll tell you how we handle that later on. And then DBC check DB, you either have to be sysadmin or you have to be DB owner in the database. So more proof that you don't always have to be sysadmin to do routine stuff. Now, the last thing I'll talk about as far as permission, the permission quiz is, do you need permissions to, do you need sysadmin rights to select on DMVs? And the answer is no. You just need view server state or view database state, depending on what you are interested in looking at. And then what permissions do you need to update DMVs? I hope to God nobody answers that question. That's a trick question. I'm just making sure you're paying attention. Yeah, just a joke. So the assumptions. You have an audit tool at your workplace. At my particular company at the time, they were using IBM's Guardium that they would install on each SQL server to monitor the traffic. And they also had a vulnerability assessment tool. And what I mean by patching done regularly, obviously your SQL servers are getting patched, but then also your network admins are doing everything that they need to do to secure the server. Because what I'm talking about is just securing access to the database. You're going to need a password vault. We used a product called CyberArk. And then you're also going to have separation of duties. And what that was is our DBAs at the insurance company were not allowed to create logins or drop logins. That had to go through, there was another department that in a website that you would submit a task and say, hey, I need login access to SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, and DBAs. The only thing we did was set permissions. But then again, all of that stuff was audited with Guardium tools. And that was something that I would have periodically, I would get back from the IT risk people. It's like, hey, can you look at this query? It came from an IP address, unknown IP address. And it was like selects on system tables. And a few times it was actually me that had run them. And I'm like, okay, that's me and that's harmless. And I'm like, but I just kind of laughed. I said, that's me running those queries. I'm like, you're sending it to the guy who executed the queries. I'm like, so.
We'll go right to the source then. That's perfect.
Yeah, there you go. And I say again, you have a security audit tool. Now, here's an example. I added this because, like I said, I work for a little small company now. There's only, instead of 5,000 people in IT, there was like 50,000 people in the last company.
Hey, Ron, a couple questions came in. Don't mean to throw you off.
Okay, go ahead.
There were any recommendations on an audit tool aside from the one that you mentioned?
Idera has a good tool that's secure. I can't remember the name of SQL.
I'll track it down.
Yeah, Idera has a product that one of the companies that we acquired had, and I even advocated for that at some point, because I said we were getting questions from auditors, and I said we could answer these questions really fast with this Idera tool. So Idera has a tool and some kind of security, SQL security, something, I forget the exact title, but I mean, that would be something I would check out, because that makes it simple. But then the only issue with that is I think it's only SQL Server. And for us at that big company, we had, like I said, DB2 on the mainframe, DB2 on Unix, Oracle, SQL Server. So we were always looking for something cross-platform. I mean, BMC was a big vendor at that company. Any other questions?
There's one, but I need clarification on it, so go ahead.
Okay. So so I work for a little small software company now, and again, I'm the only DBA onshore. The other guy offshore does more development work, but also does DBA tasks. And when my director of application development has moved on to another job, so he asked us to grant this offshore DBA some additional permissions so that he could do outage troubleshooting in case I wasn't around. And also,
outages.
Yeah, right. Well, it's like I'm on pager duty from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then the offshore guys take it from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. So, but anyway, but the job responsibilities were outage troubleshooting and also get him familiar with the production environment, because before he didn't have access to it, and because Dimitri and I handled the production side on onshore, and read-only access. So we gave him DB data reader to 2 databases, alter any event session, alter trace, connect SQL, view any database, view any definition, view server state, and he can see what he needs to see in case there's issues. But then, like I said, that's a small. He doesn't have sysadmin rights. So if you're in a small company, it is possible to do things as long as you scope out what the tasks are and do some research. I mean, more often than not, you can set this up and not grant the whole kit and caboodle to somebody.
Got it. So the question that came in was where I work, I have a security team that creates the Windows logins. But if an application uses SQL authentication, then the DBA has to create the login. So the duties are somewhat separated, but what would be the best practice there?
See, and I think that the way we set it up, and they initially they had set up some, I don't know what they use now because that's been 2.5 years since I was working there, but they bought a tool that they could submit the request to. I actually had to write some PowerShell scripts. They would produce a file, and I would have to read the file and grant the permissions. And I was using, at the time, before DBA Tools people were doing their stuff, a guy named Chad Miller, who I used to work for, he created a set of functions, SQL PSX, and I used those functions to do all the permissions and granting logins. But I think we were able to do both. Like I said, we did just the SQL Server login provisioning, and it didn't matter whether we would ask, do you want Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication? And but then beyond just the login provisioning, we didn't automate it to the point where we set the permissions. I mean, other than we could say, okay, the person needs DB data reader in a certain database, but if it got any more granular than that, then we had to get the DBA involved. But you can automate the provisioning of that of SQL authenticated logins. We did it. And I think it's got to be easier now with the DBA Tools functions that Chrissy Lemaire and Drew and all those guys and SQL DBA with a beard are working on. Rob Sewell. So
yeah, sure. I'll stick a link to there in the.
I mean, I had to migrate I had one dev server that was getting retired, and I had to migrate stuff to a virtual. And yeah, it was physical to virtual. And I just use their database migration tools. I just like type in command name, database, from to server name, boom, and just watched it go. So, I mean, those are some awesome tools. So, okay. So to lock down a database, these are the steps. You're going to need SP4HDB. That's from Aaron Bertrand.
Now, that's over in the first responder kit.
It's also, I actually, funny story about that. So Brent, I guess, contacted Aaron and said, hey, I want to put SP4HDB in the first responder kit. And I'm like, oh, cool. I added an exclude parameter for my situation, and Brent meant for Aaron to put the first version in. Well, I kind of I don't know, is jumping the shark the correct term?
Gun, maybe.
Yeah. I jumped the gun and I said, oh, here's my version. Kaboom. And Brent's like, oh, way to go, Ron.
Hang on.
So, and then I had to do something else and actually figured out how to do a pull request on Git. Now, that's the only time I've done it, so I need to do that some more. But the SP4HDB is like my original version, like version 1 that's in the first responder kit, because I haven't incorporated that into here. So to lock down a database, you're going to need that SP4HDB. You're going to need to add a controlled sysadmin group, and I'll talk about what that means. You're going to have to reduce permissions to your existing DBA groups. And our DBA's permissions were managed by Windows groups. You need to deny access to the user database schemas. Then you're going to drop the DBA groups from the sysadmin server role. And then you'll need to grant some DBAs, the DBA's additional permissions, which some of that I found out the hard way after the initial implementation. So like I said, hold on, let me take a little break here. SP4HDB, that was created by Aaron Bertrand long ago because he found out that the Microsoft provided Sprock stored procedure would actually skip databases, which is obviously not a good thing if you're doing this in production. So what I did is I took it and I had this, my situation was I needed to be able to exclude certain databases on the box. So we actually, all of our machines had a utility database on it that had a bunch of internally written stored procedures that we did backups, and it was like what old Hollingren scripts do that somebody had written back when SQL Server 2000 was out. It was written internally at the company. So that and more. So I had to exclude that from, I couldn't lock DBAs out of that, that'd be stupid. So then the next, I had to add a controlled sysadmin group. And what I mean by that is that's a group that held the logins that were managed by the privileged identity manager, that were managed by your password vault, or they also call it, well, the product was called CyberArk. So in order to gain access to an ID, you had to have a valid change or incident ticket. And they figured out an integration with our what was it, BMC Remedy, which I used to hate, Remedy Change Management System. That don't get me going on that one.
I'll try not to.
Yeah, no, oh, gosh, you need it. That's a full-time job, just getting change tickets through. But as long as you had a valid change or incident ticket, you could get promoted to a sysadmin. And then we had to reduce DBA permissions, and hopefully I don't break anything. I didn't turn off Dropbox, but I guess I'm okay. I got 100 megabits per second now. So what we did is we reduced the DBA permissions to control server, and we had to deny alter any login and deny alter any credential because the DBAs weren't responsible for that, and obviously we didn't want somebody to be able to create a login with sysadmin rights, do something bad, and then be able to remove the login. Although we probably would have caught it anyway with the Guardian tool. We had to create any database. And usually in a live setting, I would ask, why do you have to create any database? Well, you need that to be able to restore a database. And then obviously on 2012 and above, I think it was, we had to deny alter any server role because, again, I don't want DBAs, after I've yanked permissions from them, being able to create their own roles with sysadmin rights. Now, so something I found the hard way. Did I miss anything? Deny impersonate. So when we first, and I did this talk for another version of this talk for the security virtual chapter when it first started, and there was a guy on there, Bob Boschman, who I'm pretty sure worked for Microsoft for umpteen years, and a super nice guy. And he messaged me and sent me an email. And he said, "Hey, I saw something, missing from your script that you better add in." And I said, "Yeah, I know what it is. It's deny impersonate." I said, because when we first, the first set of boxes that we tested on in QA, about 30 boxes, I ran the script and I ran it as myself. And I'm a member of all these DBA groups that are going to lose permissions. So it got like partway through the script and then it started airing out. And I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And then I tried to log back into the boxes that I was changing, I was testing with. I can't get into it.
Uh-oh.
And I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, how do I get back into these things? And then I figured out that I hadn't denied impersonate. So I knew another user that still had permissions, and I executed as that user and granted myself sysadmin rights again and fixed all that stuff. And then obviously documented that the job, that the script has to be run as an ID that's not going to lose permissions. So we were using, it became part of the build scripts for a box as it moved to production. And it was run by the enterprise job scheduler. Because that job, that particular entity always had sysadmin rights on the box.
Gotcha. So there is one question in over in Slack. What permissions are required to create a table?
I would have to Google that off the top of my head right now. I mean,
it's not off the top of your head. You have to.
Off the top of my head. You'd have to have. Like create table permissions. I forget how granular it is. I would go Google it.
I would imagine that would have something to do with which schema and which.
Yeah, you'd have to have permissions on the schema, and then I think create table permission. Yeah, because I have that.
Probably just SA, right?
What's that?
Probably just need SA for that.
No. There's. Like I said, that's what made this. Like I said, this I thought was going to be a major league pain to do. And once I did all the analysis of what a DBA does and versus, what they actually needed sysadmin rights to, and the daily tasks that you do, there was the majority of them, you don't really need to be sysadmin rights. You need lesser permissions, and Control Server took care of that. And it was the easiest way to take care of it. I could have been more painfully detailed about it if I was asked to be, but this is as far down as I took it. And when I was figuring this out, I actually found, if you Google SQL Server permissions poster, Microsoft is producing these big PDFs that show
Enormous.
you, huh?
Enormous.
Yeah. You can wallpaper your cubicle with them, and but it showed it. They helped me understand pretty quickly what I needed for the requirements that I was given. So I can't say that I was trying to figure this out by reading a bunch of different documentation, but when I came across these, I was like, ooh, here we go. So picture's worth 1,000 words, I guess. So the next thing that was the requirement was they didn't want DBAs to have access to business data. And this is where I used SP4HDB, and create, retrieve, update, delete was removed from all the user schemas. I excluded our utility database, and then we also had a trace database. And interestingly enough, while I was getting ready for this, I'm like, oh, wait a minute here. Because when you were doing your presentation, I was like, you know, I've never looked at the query plan for this particular, when I run this script on a box.
Okay.
So I was like, I wonder what it does, you know. And then I was Googling on control server. I was trying to remember when was control server introduced. And I was
Sure.
Yeah, 2005. And then I was trying to remember SQL. Then there's another permission now, deny all user securables, which I think was 2014. But I found a blog post by somebody else who was kind of talking about a similar topic. Is that, hey, could you use the deny all user securables permission to keep your DBAs from snooping around your databases? Well, the problem with that is MSDB. That's another user database that DBAs need access to. And if you deny all user securables to your DBAs, they can't get to, there's a bunch of things they can't do. So that's not going to work. And that's
So this is why no one does security. It's just too hard.
It's a pain. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, it's a pain in the butt. I mean, this was this was a project for a year. I mean, this was on my or more. Yeah. I mean, this was on a performance. I mean, this was on 2 of my performance reviews. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, that's how long it took, because we like I said, we had hundreds of servers. Now thank God we only did this in production. So, you know, and they had to do it across,
Including all the testing?
oh yeah, I mean, you know, just,
Tested in production?
oh no, we didn't test it in production. We tested it in our QA boxes. So QA, the QA boxes got it applied, and the production boxes, but not the development boxes. That would have been too much, too cumbersome.
No, it brings up an interesting question there. So how did you refresh development environments if you didn't also lock them down security-wise? Because obviously developers need something to develop on.
So they had another tool. Now, depending on what the data was, because they got to the point, because I had created at some point, I know when I supported the investments line of business, I had set up some jobs that would actually restore production data. I mean, smaller ones, obviously, restore production data to a development box periodically, just to refresh it. But then it got to the point where IT risk and security said, no, that's got to stop, or it's got to go through a process where we vet the sensitivity of that database. They created a data masking factory using the IBM Optum tools, which thankfully I didn't work on anything that had to go through that process.
Right.
Because I heard that it was kind of difficult to get through it. But anything coming from production, supposedly you couldn't just do a direct production to develop and restore without some kind of scrubbing, especially if, obviously with any kind of social security or again, investments, we didn't really have, it was investments for the company.
Oh, okay.
So how they were, investing their money and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's sensitive data, but it's not like it's PII or PHI. So, but yeah, that's how that was handled. But what was interesting is as I was looking at, just rechecking some facts and getting ready for today, I thought, whoa, wait a minute. Do I exclude MSDB in my script? And I Google through my script or search through my script. I'm like, I have not excluded it, yet everything works. And so I started thinking about how we did stuff at the insurance company. And the database backups were automated by another tool run by a different user. They were run by a scheduler. So I'm like, okay, the scheduler has access to MSDB. So it worked out fine. You know, I mean, we didn't catch it back then. So I just realized it today. So your mileage may vary depending on how you do your tasks and how automated you are as far as or what tools you have at your workplace. So the next thing you're going to do is drop the DBA groups from the sysadmin role. That's after you've granted permissions to the other permissions. You got, like I said, you need to execute this as a user that will not lose privileges. And then I saw, and there's a cursor in my script, please forgive me. But I saw I think it was at the SQL Server, past summit in 2013, I saw online, Kevin Klein and Aaron were doing this talk, and it was like top 10 development tips that every developer should know or whatever. Well, he explained that if you just do declare a cursor with no options, then you're getting this full-blown, you're getting every possible option that you could have in a cursor. But if you specify local and fast forward, you kind of trim down the overhead that cursor incurs, and it runs 70% faster. And let's see if I don't know how can you see that particular
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay, so what's interesting is on the left, and this was just me running it on my laptop at the time. On the right is before I put the local fast forward in, and it took 2 seconds to run it on a couple of VentureWorks databases. Well, when I added local fast forward, and it's right here, it took 0 seconds. And the thing that's important about that is this script, the runtime is going to be dependent on how many databases are on the server and how many schemas. So, you know, that kind of savings I think is going to help you. And okay, so here's in my notes, it's 2013 past summit, 10 query tuning techniques every SQL programmer should know. So Kevin Klein and Aaron Bertrand did that, and that's where I got that tip from. Now, I also had to grant some additional permissions, and these, like I said, I found out the hard way. The initial implementation there, you know, again, what was funny about it was I said, hey, we're going to do this. Hey, we're going to do this. Hey, we're going to do this. And then a lot of times in big companies, they're like, oh, yeah, it's not going to happen. Well, it got to the point where it was starting to happen. And then it was funny. I started getting a lot more feedback from the teams that weren't talking to me previously. You know, they were not quite as forthcoming. And turned out we needed to grant them the SQL agent operator role so they can manage SQL agent jobs, because the initial implementation of this, they couldn't see SQL agent in Management Studio. And at the time, we had a lot of log shipping in place. So you need to have access to SQL agent to manage log shipping, obviously. And then we also used SSIS, so they needed the SSIS, say that 3 times fast, SSIS admin.
Never.
You know, to manage the packages. And then sadly, after a few more iterations, we came across a server that still was running DTS, and I had to add the DTS admin permission grant to the script. So, like I said, a picture is worth 1,000 perms. You know, this.
What would you know about perms?
Perms, right? Yeah. No, yeah, I know exactly. That's a good one. This just, and this is like just the top left corner of this permission poster, and it showed me everything I needed to know and helped me understand what the security model looked like. And then, I mean, if you know, God forbid you need to do this in your own workplace, I mean, it does help. I mean, and it just, after all the analysis that I did, it came down to, for our situation, granting control server and a few denies was the solution. So we'll do a quick demo. Looks like I'm doing good for time.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for me, God actually does, forbid we do security. So according to Brent, we can't touch it. So I'm very happy that I don't have to deal with this.
Oh, again, you guys are a small company. Oh, and you mean you don't touch it for
clients? Yeah, no.
Clients.
No, it's explicitly out of the contract.
I spent a fair amount of time the last few years having to deal with this. I helped install Guardium. I helped install the vulnerability assessment tool, configure it, use some more PowerShell to do that. And security, it can be a full-time job, especially in these big companies, and given all the craziness that's going on these days, you can definitely make a living at it. So, but before we go look at the script, I want to give you some wise words from a guy named Buck Woody.
Ooh, one of my favorites.
I stole this from him, and I always give him credit. But he says, for people who need this sort of thing, never trust any script, including those that you find here, until you understand exactly what it does and how it will act on your systems. Always check the script on a test system, a virtual machine, not a production system. Yes, there are always multiple ways to do things, and the script may not work in every situation for everything. I think I've already said that. It's just a script, people. All scripts on this site are performed by a professional stunt driver on a closed course. Your mileage may vary, avoid where prohibited, offer good for a limited time only, keep out of reach of small children, do not operate heavy machinery while using the script. If you experience blurry vision, indigestion, diarrhea during the operation of the script, see a physician immediately. And that's the wisdom of Buck Woody. So we have serious Buck Woody on the left and not so serious Buck Woody on the right. Who's a great guy. And and when I showed that script disclaimer at the last SQL Saturday in Orlando, people they were busting up laughing. And I'm like, you guys have not seen this?
Buck Woody is a hidden gem.
I'm telling you, he's a great guy. All right, so let me go over to Management Studio, which is over here. And then can you see Management Studio now?
We're good.
Okay. So, and I actually included that here, and then some notes. This is from SQL Saturday Orlando. And again, it's 6 steps that I just went over through. So SP4HDB, and the caveat is I haven't put the latest one in from the first responder kit. And, this is where I added the exclude list because I had to, go ahead.
No, it was cool. Looks good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it was easy because I just cloned, the statement above that. And then, so, and I had to add this, this parameter here. So again, for the exclude list. And then what else here? Okay, and then I have a step in here and where I have to add the DBA groups that are controlled by the password manager. So that's commented out for the demo because I don't have a domain controller running on this thing, but it's there for your reference in case I would imagine, hopefully you're using Windows authentication to manage access to your database servers. That's what we did. So there's, and this is set up, when I had to do this, this was set up to deal with 2005, 2008, 2012, and I just actually tweaked it some because I was testing for, I changed it to test for SQL Server 2012 or higher. Now that we have 2014, 2016, 2017, and I see a typo, way to go, Heider. I'm not going to change it. So here's where I set up granting minimum permissions. Now, initially, I did not include deny impersonate. And I would say once you're certain that you've got your environment set up created correctly and you've got your comfortable with permissions, I would add that in here. And this is where we're doing, and I have it set up to run against SQL logins. And if you're going to run it at where you need Windows groups, you're going to need to uncomment this where clause. And I've made these notes at the top So depending on how you're authenticating, you're going to have to adjust this. And the minimal changes. And then here's where I deny access to user database schemas. And this bit of code here was a lot of fun with all the freaking quotes, you know. So, and then like I said, we're deny, alter, select, insert, update, delete, execute on schema. And then, you know, not like trying to keep you from stomping on the things that are supplied by Microsoft or your own schemas. And then here's where I run SB4HTB. And there's my exclude list. And then this is pretty straightforward. Drop DBA groups from the sysadmin server role. And then depending on the version, you know, you alter server. If it's lower, it's the lower version, then it'll do a drop server role member. And then here's where I had to add SQL agent operator role. This kept growing. You know, it started out with just SQL agent operator role, then I had SSIS admin, then DTS admin. And this is where the cursor is. There you go.
And let the cursing begin.
Yeah, so then you just run it. And it helps if you don't highlight something when you run it. Oh, see, I was playing around with the execution plan. It was
No one
taken.
wants to get the plan for that.
Yeah, right. It takes longer because I have that selected. Come on. There it is. So this is the kind of output that you'll see. Now I have it set just to print, but this is what it generates. I have 2 DBA groups defined on the box. So it's granting control server. So first it takes care of the server permissions on that particular box. And that's what this part is. And then it goes through,
cool.
Yeah. And then it goes through every database. So you get a name of a database, and then whatever schemas it finds. So here's AdventureWorks, and it's restricting access to DBO, guest, human resources, you know, person, production, purchasing, sales, and the same thing with with this database here. And then it just runs the alters for the extra permissions, and boom, you're done. So let's go back to any questions on that.
It doesn't look like it. It's been a pretty active Slack chat going on, posting links. All the stuff you've been talking about, I've been trying to get links going in so
Okay.
that everyone can.
Yeah, and I have links at the end here. So just to recap, with 2005 onward, you definitely can create a configurable security model for whatever your situation is at your workplace. If you're concerned about, you have issues or concerns about who has access to your production data, it's just that one script to lock down the databases. Your databases will be more, servers will be more secure. Your auditors will be happy. Hopefully, hackers will be not so happy. You know, and then these are the resources I used, and that permission poster is, again, that's from like SQL Server, earlier version of SQL Server. They keep updating it. At Past Summit 2012, Don Keeley was talking about the evolution of security in SQL Server 2012. He coined the phrase, he called control server virtual sysadmin. And it really is. And the important part about it is sysadmin, I can't deny you any permissions. But as a control server, I can, if you have just control server, I can deny you permissions. So you can, you know, limit your DBA's access to production. And then I also saw in Past Summit 2010 is when Laura Rebelke and that Si Se Puede, Achieving Separation of Duties with SQL Server, that's when they unveiled that first white paper. And then that article about CyberArk just talks about privileged users. I mean, those are the big targets that nowadays for hackers. Now, I also found some good stuff from another MCM, Andreas Volter, on his blog. He does a good coverage of comparing in control server to sysadmin SA permissions. and then a link to the 10 query tuning techniques that I got the cursor hit from. And then Krebs on security. If you're interested in security, Brian Krebs writes a really good blog. He used to work for the Washington Post, and then he got so big that he went out on his own. And he's got, it's not SQL Server typically, it's focused on security at a higher level, but it's a really good read. And then there's another article from SQL Mag about database security.
Oh, very cool.
So that's all I have now, sir. So that was fun. How long did that take? It took an hour.
Oh, very nice. Well, thank you, Ron. Appreciate you doing the session. That's very cool.